Welcome back to the SLT podcast. Thank you very much for all of those of you who have liked, subscribed, and followed over the past few episodes. We have a special one today. Normally we have one guest on, but we've been lucky enough to be blessed with two guests.
It is a blessing.
So we've got two guests on, and we'll be doing our regular segment. You know myself, Ziggy Moore from More Education, assistant head, a few other things coming in the pipeline. I'm going to hand over to my amazing co-host,
Miss Johnson. So I have to say, before I do the introductions, this is probably the most exciting register I've ever taken. So we're going to do the introductions in alphabetical order. So Alison, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Alison Kriel. In times gone past, I was an executive head teacher and a CEO, and I left in 2017 to fly solo. My primary reason was to set up a platform where educators can connect, celebrate, share, ask for help, come together, because we are so separate and working so hard when we would be much better off coming together and supporting each other. So I set up a platform called Above and Beyond Education, my biggest learning curve, and I continue to learn. I also do keynote speaking. I do a little podcast series. I do a bit of writing, a huge chunk of mentoring. So those are the primary things that I do nowadays. And also, this is me being technically retired.
Yeah, you're sounding very retired, by the way. Do you mind just pulling the mic up just slightly close so we make sure we can definitely hear your voice. Oh wow! So that's what retirement looks like, yeah?
In my world, yeah.
Okay.
I love working.
Wonderful,
but it's
love
on
it.
my terms.
Wonderful. We have the return of
Elizabeth Olulari. It's such a privilege to be here and with Alison. It's going to be absolutely amazing. So, just as a quick intro, my name is Elizabeth Olulari. I work for the Church of England as the National Education Lead for Racial Justice. Following on from Alison's idea of, yeah, we love working. And I think it's a blessing
Oh God, yes.
to be able to work, because some people can't work.
That's true.
So alongside working for the Church of England, I am the CEO of Teckles, which is my transformative education solutions, which I run, and as well as my lovely clothing line, which I'm repping. You know, it's called Styled by Pretty Kitty, but it's like we don't have enough work to do. I also write books. So proud to be a published author and a coach, which I find so worthwhile, you know, coaching other people and seeing them fulfill their dream. Hashtag winning. We've got this.
I love it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely. So, Rena, normally we do the segment where we take questions from parents,
Yeah.
and me, yourself, and our other co-host Jordan would normally answer. But we're going to change it. We're going to change it up a bit. We've had some questions in because of the esteemed guest we have in, and we've got more than one as well. We've taken some questions in from middle leaders and senior leaders. So it'd be lovely to get your views on some of these questions. So, Rena, start us off. Give us some questions that we've had in. And if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to pop us an email. Our lovely media person's going to put the email here somewhere. I think it's SLTPodcast
At gmail.com.
Yeah, they'll put it there. So if you've got any questions, parents, senior leaders, people who want to come on as guests, because we've had quite a few people, please don't hesitate. But Rena, start us off with our question.
Okay, so the first one is, I'm an associate assistant head and the only female in SMT. SMT is senior management team, for those of you who don't know. I often get shouted down in meetings and can't work out if it's because I'm only an associate or a woman, or if it's both. What can I do to make my voice heard?
So I think that the whole associate post is controversial, and it is a relatively new role.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that people who take on any kind of associate post, what's been acknowledged by the people who appoint them is that they are perfectly capable of doing the job. But the title associate means that they're not recognized and they don't have the authority to act independently. And so it's seen as a second tier rather than a top tier. And so I imagine that in this particular case, it's a healthy mix of the two.
Okay.
And I would imagine that the only way that's going to be healed is either by working with someone who has mediation experience. I'm actually working in a school where this is going on at the moment.
Oh, right.
And where I'm sitting down and speaking to each person individually, because it's not about blaming and shaming, but it's about sort of saying, have you considered, or getting people to see things from different perspectives and maybe understand their behaviors and maybe recognize and empathize with the person who's feeling invisible. And then we come back together again to try and find a way so that the table is extended and so that everyone has equitable voice rather than being made to feel that their opinion and their voice is of secondary importance.
I'm so glad you're here to give such a wonderfully balanced, informed answer, because mine would have been very different. Hence why I'm going to be quiet, because that was a perfectly balanced, experienced answer. Elizabeth, would you contribute? What would you?
Yes, I would add in addition to that, because I would caveat that will be able to be done if you have a senior leader who understands the importance of value and that everybody brings a unique added value to the team. Unfortunately, I have worked in certain places where no matter how much you try to mediate, because of the beautiful melanin and the gender intersectionality, they just really find it difficult to just get their head around it and see people as humans, full stop. You know, that tiering you spoke about. Again, for starters, why do we need associates? Is it that I can do the job or I can't do the job? In one of the books I read, and I feel like it is How Women Rise. I'm not sure, but I would have to double check. It said something about getting an advocate. And I explained, I'm a scientist and I love to test out my hypothesis. I want to know if they're shutting me down or it's just in my head. So, this is a fantastic hypothesis or scientific experiment you can do. If there is an ally in that group, in the SMT group, and you already know the agenda, share your idea with that person and tell them to raise the idea, especially if the person is male and white. Okay. Now, if that answer is, if it's taken up, then I guess for me, it's that reassurance that I am intelligent, I am clever, my ideas are good, because that's where imposter syndrome comes in and having to validate myself. And then I know actually you lot have the problem, not me. And sometimes you might have to go to where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
I love that.
Isn't that fantastic?
Absolutely. And I'd always say that you try. You do try. You seek a way to feel like you are accepted and you feel like you belong. But actually, you know, life is short and we give a huge chunk of our lives to work. And if you are spending a huge chunk of your life feeling undervalued, dismissed, invisible, then you're on the wrong bus.
Yeah.
And a lot of I can speak to a lot of women, especially, who will say they're there for the children, they've got to do it for the children, all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, well, what are the children seeing? And, if you are feeling that you're not being accepted as a true leader by the organization, that's what the children are learning. And that's what the white children are learning. And that's what the black children are learning. So you're perpetuating a myth. And ultimately, the most empowering thing you can do is to go to a place where you can rise, where you can be accepted and you can contribute to the success of the whole, because that will feed into society in a much broader way. So don't allow yourself to be undervalued by anyone. You do try, and in the case that I'm talking in, you're absolutely right. It started off with the person concerned asking me for help and me then speaking to the school leader. I'm still not convinced. I think it might just be pacifying. Yes, let's get her in, let's try and do this. But at the end of the day, those people will either rise or they'll fall, and it's for them. It's a learning curve for everyone concerned, and ultimately, I would always say, once you've tried, remember your life is valuable, and go somewhere where you will be valued.
Yeah. When you said that you're doing it for the children, I genuinely have never looked at it from that lens, because I would say that, oh, I'm here for the children, I'm doing this. But actually, what we're teaching them is to remain undervalued in a toxic environment. I mean, one of the books I will recommend by Diana Sage, Courageous Leadership, she said, there are children everywhere. And it sounds really simple, but I needed to hear that. I was like, oh my God, you're right. There are children everywhere. But you've just added another layer of self-awareness for me by saying, actually, when I'm staying for this set of children, I'm actually perpetuating the same of the same. Yeah.
Just to add my 2 pence. I love the way you've taken all of the things that I was thinking, but just put it in just such a well-rounded, because I was just like, yeah, just leave, innit? Don't take it, yeah. And it's to be brave as well, because a lot of time, like, that fear, like, feel the fear and do it anyway. Leave. A lot of people are scared, circumstance, they don't know what will come up. You'll be all right. I've been in the circumstance. Okay, I don't have the dynamic of in regards to being a woman, but where you're in like, you've got bills to pay, you have children, you have responsibilities, you can't leave, and you're in a very, very often oppressing situation, I should say. Don't be scared to leave, because there is always, in education, there's always a place that will value you.
Yeah.
Always a place that will value you.
And that brings us back to the whole point about leadership. And I think if you're going to be, I mean, everyone's a leader, because we start by leading ourselves. I always say that. So it doesn't matter what your job title is, you're a leader. And I think we should live consciously and we should lead consciously. So you consciously choose to work in a particular place, and you consciously know what your vision and your values and your worth is, and you carry that out into society. So I most of my keynotes now are around being a conscious leader and what that means.
Wonderful.
There were just so many quotes that I'm going to pull from this episode, honestly.
We're going to get so many reels out of this. Get so many.
Oh my goodness.
Value for money.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay, so the next one is, a vacancy has come up for vice principal at one of the schools in the trust. I want to apply and feel like I could do the job, but can't shake off the feeling of imposter syndrome. What should I do? Which is interesting, because you mentioned imposter syndrome.
I think there's a lot of research out there about imposter syndrome. And I'm a big believer of we're lifelong learners. So a good starting step is to read about it. For me, when I see something like a massive fear, but once I start doing my work, doing my research, and the more I know, the more confident I become. And then I go, oh, okay. So I think the first thing is to read, watch podcasts about it, watch seminars about imposter syndrome, and you would find. So one of the takes away from imposter syndrome I've taken is imposter syndrome is good.
Okay.
It's not all negative, because it's about what do you do next with that. So if I'm sitting in a space and I think I'm about to do a keynote on International Women's Day, and I'm thinking, how qualified am I? I don't know anything. But actually, the more I research, all of a sudden, that imposter syndrome leaves me. And so my first one is learn around the subject, become confident about that subject. So you said a vice principal role.
Yeah.
So my first question would be, have you spoken to colleagues about what they do in that role? Have you read the job description and maybe written short notes about each point to go, I can do this? Have you even spoken to a friend or a colleague or your coach? I really advocate for getting a coach and then going, how do you see me? Because sometimes I speak to leaders and they go, oh, Elizabeth, I can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean you can't do that? You do X, Y, Z. And like, I've never seen it in that light, So sometimes someone else explaining how they see you in their greatness makes you feel, actually, you are great, and there are lots and lots of transferable skills. I spoke to a mother once, a mother of 5, and she goes, oh, I can't do this. She goes, like, I'm like, yes, you can. The fact you have 5 children and your house is running, project management skills, like, do you know how many skills that is? Do you see? It is.
Right, I agree with you.
And I was coaching someone for a job, and she goes, oh, I can't do this. I'm like, no, you need to bring your lived experience as a female. The main fact I can diffuse a fight between 2 teenagers without raising my voice. I'm very good at conflict resolution. But it is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's high time we see what we do every day as females in our societal gender roles and see how it's transferable in the workplace. And that's why one research says, depending, I'm not putting everyone in a silo, all the same, but when you have real good conscious leaders who are female, the well-being of the staff is a lot better.
Absolutely.
And it's because of those skills that we had, well, I will speak for myself, I've had to learn as female, in my family growing up. So my advice about imposter syndrome will be A, read up on it. B, master the job description. Go chew it inside and out. Ask questions. I love AI. AI is your friend. Just ask AI, I'm having imposter syndrome about this. Tell me what somebody else in this job has. And to be honest with yourself, if you have certain qualities that is needed for the flourishing of that role, I would say work on them, but be honest about it. I would never say not go for it. I would say go for it and say, I have been able to identify I need to work on X, Y, Z. These are the active steps I'm doing to work on X, Y, Z. Having been the role of the vice principal will give me a practical way to implement this. And when I do this in your school, you are going to see the added value of X, Y, Z, and it's being able to articulate what you're going to do in terms of imposter syndrome. But I would say imposter syndrome is not always negative, always necessarily negative, depending on how you relate to it, So I think it's the fight, flee,
Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
or fawn, right? So identify where you're sitting with there, and I would say grow from it. That will be my take. You grow. And just to caveat, even when you fully master the role as a vice principal and you want to become the principal and the exec head, you are still going to have this imposter syndrome. But now you've created a framework, good habits of what to do when you have those feelings. That would be my take on that.
I mean, I can't add anything to that.
Do you want me to say anything?
Yeah,
Or
Yes,
of course
please,
you
of
can,
course.
I think that's just a stunning answer. So thank you for making me think. But I also would add that the imposter syndrome is simply a voice in your head. And you could choose to make friends with that voice, but you can also tell that voice to be quiet. You know, your advice right now is not helpful to me. And often they say we've got 5 voices in our head, and we are in charge of which voices we want to listen to. So you could choose to have 5 voices. They don't have to be even people who are still alive. It could be people who've passed. It could be a famous person or whatever. But those voices are the ones which guide you, which help you to stay connected to who you truly are. So imposter syndrome is simply a voice in your head, but there are 5 types of imposter syndrome. And so again, find out which one you are and understand that better so that you can take control of self. But I already know by the question it's a woman who wrote it, because when a job is advertised, if a guy can he can look at the job description and say, yeah, I can do that, I'll go for it. A woman will only do it, I will only apply for it if she can already do every single thing on the job description. You said JD then, but I'm doing good. So, which means that men grow into jobs. If they can do 50% of the job, they will apply for it. And for them, development is growing into that job. And then just as soon as they crack it, they off onto the next rung. Yeah. Women always apply for jobs they can already do. So the potential for growth is significantly reduced compared to men. So women just need to be, we overqualified. And then you look at black women. How many black women have got 2 masters?
Yep. One sitting here.
Exactly. Why? And then you have other people who have no masters getting bigger jobs than you.
Yeah.
Because we are so obsessed with this voice telling us we're not good enough, we need to overprove ourselves, we need to be overqualified, justifying ourselves to who? For what? If we are already incredibly competent people who can do a job, we always go for something that doesn't challenge us enough. And that's where you end up with these situations. You just asked us a question about, feeling like you're not being heard at the table and all that kind of stuff. Those guys there see you as the new girl on the block. They see you as the associate. You may be the one with the most experience. You may be the person with the biggest academic credentials and all of those sorts of things, but they just seeing you as you've allowed them to see you rather than as you truly are. So stand up tall, stand up proud. And when you're applying for a job, then I'd say maybe if you can reduce, instead of being able to do 100% of the job, maybe allow yourself to apply for 80% of the job so that you've got 20% for growth. And when you go into the interview and they say, have you got experience of this, that, and the other, then you'll say, no, or I do. I've got this experience which will allow me to grow into that particular job, but I'm really into development and I'd like to know how the organization will support me in
really
growing. Good. And there was one other thing I was going to say. Applying for internal posts, I'd say be very cautious because when you apply for a job internally, people will often see you in your old role. So, for example, if you were a class teacher and you're sitting around the staff room table and you're everybody's mate and all that kind of stuff, and then you suddenly take on responsibilities where you have to line manage friends, then that can be a very, very difficult thing that you have to do. And so I'd always say, think really carefully about whether if you do really want to take on more responsibilities, would you be better off going to a new organization where the staff and the children will see you in your new role rather than rely on you being the person of old? because that there will definitely be tensions.
Thank you. All right, so the next one isn't a question. It's more of a rant.
We love
And
a
it
rant.
reads, so vexed. Just found out another head of department is on a higher salary than me and he doesn't even have a TLR, exclamation mark. So I'm not sure if they wanted us to respond to that or if they just felt,
Mhm.
I just need to get this off my chest.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think the
It's
gender
interesting
pay
because
gap.
I'm getting a theme of this undervalued.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know why. I'm assuming. I don't know why I'm assuming this might be a woman as well, because women are generally underpaid. I've seen it in schools a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
for doing the same roles.
I'm smiling because it's me. Okay.
Oh
So I
wow!
can talk from personal
Oh wow!
experience.
That was your email.
No, it's not
Oh.
my email. But I can talk from personal experience. The first thing is men learn from a really young age how to negotiate their salary, and women
Yeah.
aren't so very good at it. We get embarrassed because we don't recognise our self-worth.
Mm.
But I can remember discovering that at one point in my career, I had significantly more experience as a school leader. I had by far the highest results. We were the highest performing school in the whole of London.
Is
Which
that of a trust or
at that point I was a local authority head teacher.
okay?
But my school had the highest results in the whole of London, and we also had one of the highest progress rates in the whole of the country.
Oh wow!
We were the most oversubscribed school, and I was the lowest paid head teacher in the authority. And it's because I didn't negotiate. I didn't know how to negotiate my salary. Um, but also, I'm not really motivated by money, so I wasn't there thinking how much is this person getting or asking any of those sorts of questions. So you go for your performance management, and then the governors would say, yes, you've met, or you've more than exceeded your targets, so we'll move you up an incremental point, because that's what I thought everyone was doing. I didn't know it was up for negotiation. I didn't know that people were being hard-nosed. I didn't realize how much more the men were getting than the women. And then come Ofsted's, it was the men saying, we've got Ofsted coming, can you come? And all the women would go along and help them out with their schools and stuff.
Sorry, I
But you
shouldn't
didn't
laugh.
get a man, you didn't get a
Yeah.
man coming and helping
Helping.
you with your Ofsted in the same kind of way. So there are, but ultimately it was me. I was ignorant. I didn't know how to do it. I felt embarrassed. I felt like it was begging. And I always kind of thought, I'm in this for the children. Money isn't my motivator. I'm into servant leadership. Well, yes, I stand by all of those things, but I allowed myself to be taken advantage of.
Wow.
So you just have to learn to do it.
I
And
want.
it's uncomfortable.
I wonder, Alison, if you can shed more light about, because what I would say sometimes is you've successfully negotiated this. So I think, when would you say is the right time to do it? Because you've mentioned it was during your performance management, so like I'm thinking of this person who's written in, how, when will be who should they raise this up with? How do they, just like real practical steps? Because I think this person should not go one more day underpaid.
Yeah, I think that first of all, they need to make sure that they've understood things properly, because sometimes people can mouth off.
True.
So just be sure before you get riled, before you start going in with all guns blazing, make sure that you're properly informed, and then speak to other staff within the organisation, but also speak beyond the organisation so that you can get a sense of the national picture. Now, the problem in education is salaries are taboo, they're very secret. Because I can remember my governors saying to me, well, because I raised it with them, and I sort of said, this is my understanding, but I'm not sure. And they sort of said, but if you can find out what other head teachers are paid, then we'll be able to be more supportive of what you are asking for. So I then contacted the head of HR and said, "Can you help me?" And she came back and she said, "This is the range within the local authority, but we're not allowed to talk about it."
Okay.
So it's very, very hard to get that kind of information. But most of it is done through performance management. So this person will know when they're going to be meeting with their the person who is supporting them through performance management, and by then they should have done their research. They should certainly, I mean, write to all of the unions and find out what the national picture is and all of those sorts of things, and then go in with a reasonable proposal. Don't go in shouting and arguing and stuff, because all you're doing is undermining your professionalism. So go in, be wise, be articulate, and if they come back to you and say that they recognize your worth and this is what they're prepared to do for you, and you're willing to accept it, then accept it graciously. But if you feel that they aren't willing to move, then move.
Yeah.
There's a bottom line. If they're not willing to move, then move. But you give them an opportunity to show that they value you, they want you to stay, they want you to be paid in a fair way. But if you think that it's blatant discrimination, you can only push so much sand uphill.
I think that relates not just to within education, but in all areas of employment, where you've got a point that you're not willing to take. This is what you want, and I'm thinking about it in having some experience from the other side. It's expensive to recruit. It is very, very, it's very costly to recruit.
Yes.
It's difficult to recruit teachers of a certain standard and quality. You could recruit so for example, just to add my 2 pence again, you've got, and this, I see it all the time and it frustrates me, like you've got these teachers who are there like 8-9 years and they're there for the kids and they say, I just want to see this cohort through. Then they go and then they get another one, and then somebody who comes
That was me.
somebody
for 18 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
You're there worrying about, I don't know, an extra £7,000, for example. Yeah, so I'll say £7,000. Yeah, and you're scared to ask, and you're rejected. It's gonna cost the school, probably more than that, to recruit on board. Hopefully that person works well with the children. Hopefully that person fits into the school, and hopefully they stay for longer than a year. So imagine you spend £11,000 recruiting this teacher, and they come in great, 18 months, or they're going into this start in September and they leave in the Easter. So from a numbers perspective, we really think about it. You're probably worth more to the organisation to keep you than it is to go and recruit another teacher or employee. And that's just in education. In other walks of life, to really recruit costs a lot.
Can I ask another question? And I know I'm the one supposed to be answering questions. The irony is not lost with me. So I've actually had this experience with pay gap. Or how do you navigate it when your line manager is not the one who has the final say about finances? And then your line manager doesn't want you to go up because then you're earning the same as them. And, in my argument, it's not my fault. You don't want to advocate for yourself, but I want to advocate for myself. But then that person becomes that glass ceiling because they're like, hold on, you want to be earning what I earn, rather than them saying, if who I line manage is earning this, then maybe I'm also, undervaluing myself. So
that's when you write a letter to the governors, because ultimately it's trustees and governors who set the range, not the line manager. So I would write a careful, polite letter where you state your case And so it's not about what your line manager's earning, because that's not your business. Your business is to take care of you and your family, and to do the best job that you can for the organization. So I would write a letter to the trustees and ask them to consider it. And if they come back and approve it, and your line manager is splitting feathers, well, that line manager is a choice. They can either be angry and resentful,
Yep.
or they can choose to follow your lead.
And it's very interesting you say that, because I do like the fact of I'm not responsible for the way you respond or react, but I'm responsible to myself and to what I envisage my worth at this point in my life should be. And I think some teachers do not know that they have access to their governors and their trustees.
They do.
Yeah.
Because I was speaking to someone and it looked like the whole SLT is in collude. And I'm like, you do know you can go directly to your governor? Like, yes.
You can.
You know, like you can and you should go directly to the governors, because the SLT was even using the governors as a whip. You know, or the governors actually, no, you go directly to the governors. Let the governors tell you by themselves, rather than the SLT suggesting what the governor would say. Lo and behold, the governor said yes.
They will do. Well, they won't necessarily, but then that tells you the story that you need to be hearing, and you make your decisions based on that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We that's going to be our final question for this segment. But the answers have been amazing. Thank you very, very much. And remember, listen, we have guests on all the time. We can get these. I don't know. I'm feeling, because we've got executive heads and all that. You know what I mean? Like we've had some big guns on recently. So yeah, send in your questions. Email below, because we get the guests on the SLT podcast, and we'll get those answers. But thank you ever so much for addressing those questions. And I know those are things that sit heavily with people that they'd never ask and never know where to go. So thank you. That's another episode of the SLT podcast. Thank you very much, wonderful guests, for your answers. And we will see you. Make sure you are doing the good stuff. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All right. We'll see you on the next episode.